Hello and welcome and happy Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I am Sarah, your host of Survivor Stories, the uncensored truth on cancer. I am joined today with Franny, a Staten Island native, high school teacher of 14 years, wife and mother of a 3-year-old boy, as well as a triple negative stage 2, grade 3 breast cancer survivor. Welcome, Franny. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I would like to kick it off with how was life before the breast cancer diagnosis, which I know you said was in 2020, right?
Yeah, it was. So my son's actually 4.
Oh,
So I had him the 11 months before my diagnosis. So between COVID and so my son was born in January of 2020. COVID is already a thing, but doesn't really hit hard in here in New York City until March. And so when we go on lockdown, I have a 2-month-old baby and the world is on lockdown, and I'm a germaphobe to begin with, so I'm kind of doing this new parent thing all on my own with my husband and not really anyone around. So the whole year leading up to diagnosis was super stressful, and now sometimes when I think about that time, I wonder, like is all of my residual stress and anxiety because of cancer or COVID or new parenthood, or we had bought a house 2 months prior to having a baby. It was just the biggest year of my life in so many ways. But life was really great. I mean, I was going through all of these major, um, aside from the worldwide pandemic killing people,
yeah,
but
of course.
I was going, I was going through all these, major milestones that I had always dreamed of going through. Um, and yeah, I felt like my life, the real part of my life was really starting, because I was in my early 30s, which in New York is a normal time to have children, even if in the rest of the
Yeah,
country it's
and buy
super
a
old.
house.
Yeah. Well, it's super early to buy a house here in New York, but
Oh,
we
I
had
mean,
some
I'm
some
I'm
help from family.
approaching 30 and no home, renter probably forever.
Yeah, I mean, especially my husband and I are both civil servants in a way, and the idea of ever buying a house would have been impossible if we didn't have family help, but we were so lucky to be able to do that. And so just everything in my life changed in the course of 13 months at that point. So
Wow. So how did you, clearly you were young, so how did you come into knowing that you need to go see a doctor, and where did that whole thing begin?
yeah, so a part of my story that uh we have to rewind way back to really think about my cancer and my diagnosis and everything, because I was in high school in Lower Manhattan on September 11th and in the 4 years following it. So I had been aware of and increasingly aware of, because my father, who was also downtown in Manhattan working at that time, was diagnosed with cancer. A lot of people have been diagnosed with cancer that were in that area in the time following, the buildings collapse and the burning, kind of pit of materials and all of the pollutants that had been released into the air. So I have been very quick for the last few years to sort of get anything funky checked out, because I was always sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so my son was about 11 months old, and we had just closed on the house that we'd been living in for a year. And I was weaning him, and life was starting to somewhat normalize with COVID, although it took a whole another year for that to really feel better.
Yeah.
But I woke up one morning and I had a lump, and I had never felt it before. And at first I'm like, look, I'm weaning my son, I'm cutting down his feeds, well, pumping, but I was cutting down my pumps, and this is probably just a clogged duct or mastitis or something like that. But it was really hard, and it just didn't feel right. And I remembered when I first started seeing a gynecologist when I was a teenager, she said, if you ever feel something that feels like a frozen pea, or just
Mhm.
something of that consistency, that is when you need to immediately get it checked out. So how hard it was really struck me. And I was like, I don't love this for me. So I waited 3 days, and it didn't go away, and it didn't turn into an infection. It wasn't a mastitis situation. I didn't have a fever. There wasn't heat. It was just this really hard lump in the underside of my breast. So I did go to see my gynecologist, and it was like I told you, I was a total germaphobe. I didn't want to go to any kind of doctor's office at this point because I just didn't want to be around people.
Didn't want to risk it, didn't want to bring it home to your kid.
I had a
Yeah,
kid
that's
with no
totally
immune system
understandable.
still,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but I sucked it up and I went to my gynecologist, and I saw like a nurse practitioner there, and she felt on it and she's like, it's probably just breastfeeding related or a cyst or something. Like, just to be safe, I'll send you for a mammogram and an ultrasound. She's like, but those things can really hurt because they like squish your breast so much. So you might want to wait till like after your next period to go actually get the mammogram. But I just had this like spidey sense, and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do that. So I got an appointment for 2 days later, or 3 days later, which also got rescheduled because of a snowstorm. It was just like this series of disasters.
Everything. Yeah.
But of course, I'm by myself because it's 2020 and you don't bring anyone to your doctor's appointments. My husband is at home with our baby, and I go to the doctor's office, and I really think that this is nothing. Like, I'm getting it checked out to be safe because I'm a paranoid person, but I really think that this is nothing. Like, 33-year-olds with no like known genetic mutations. Like, I'd had a 23andMe done. I didn't think I had BRCA. So I was like, this is not going to be a thing. And then I remember my ultrasound tech, who had done other ultrasounds for me in the past, like when my doctor wanted to like keep an eye on things. Nothing had been major in the past. He was so nice, and he's like, so how are you feeling, like what's new? And I was like, oh, I'm weaning my son, like can't wait for my body to be mine again and like go back to normal. And I just watched him get really quiet. And then he's like, okay, I just need to go like run the images by the radiologist. And then the radiologist came in, and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
this isn't good. And so
They
they
don't normally come in the room.
no, they don't normally come in the room. And then they were like, okay, this doesn't look great. We're gonna go get a mammogram just to like get some more views, and then we'll bring you back in here if we need to get more ultrasound views. And I was like, what do you mean doesn't look great? And they're just like, there's just something irregular there. And I was like, okay, cool, love this. So I went to the mammogram, and I had the same mammographer who I'd had in the past because I'd had cysts in my breasts that had been checked out and aspirated and were nothing in the past. And I really thought that this was just another one of those. And she was like, oh yeah, like I see that right on there, like I'll pray for you. And I was like, shit, like that is
Oh
not,
no.
I don't like that.
No, no, that is
No,
not the answer or the comment that you want after that.
no. So the radiologist looks at that, and then she brings me back in the room. She's like, okay, look, like we normally would schedule a biopsy for this, just because it's suspicious looking, and I don't like how hard it is. Like, I don't like how solid it looks on imaging. So she's like, I'm just, we cleared, we're just not going to take lunch today. Like, we're just going to do this biopsy for you right now. And I'm just like, excuse me, what? Ah.
Oh, that is a
So,
quick turnaround.
and I'm like, this is really bad if
Yeah.
they're doing it that fast. So they did a biopsy then and there. I like drive myself home. I can't lift my son for like 2 weeks because of where the biopsy was, and like they don't want me to open it up or whatever. And I'm trying to talk to my husband about this, and he is in like total denial. Um, for context, my husband is a cancer survivor. So when he was 15, he was diagnosed with osteosarcoma in his leg. And that was found in a freak accident because a kid at his high school tackled him playing, what is that game with the sticks? Lacrosse. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
lacrosse. A
Mhm.
kid, a kid tackled him. I don't know.
I don't think tackling is allowed in lacrosse either.
I don't
So
think so
that
either.
really
So
is a freak accident.
right, exactly. And so like, and this is like a kid, I won't name him, but this is like a kid who was like a local celebrity, like and had
Mhm.
quite a
A
personality,
golden
and
boy or the
more of an
opposite.
infamy than like a golden,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
just like a lunk, you
Hmm.
know. So anyway, um so they took him to get x-rays because they thought that he had torn his ACL, which he had, and they found cancer all up and down his leg. So like he knows the surprise diagnosis thing, but he's also so traumatized from that whole situation that he was just in complete denial. He's like, listen, our dog Gus, my cardigan corgi at the time,
Oh.
he was so cute. I killed that dog with stress, I swear. Like a year after treatment, he was done. Like his heart just
Oh
gave out.
no. Well, he kept
I
with you
know.
through it.
Oh my God, he did. But he was amazing. But he was like, Gus hasn't been sniffing your boob. Like dogs can smell cancer, can't they? And like Gus hasn't said anything. I'm like, so you're gonna tell me that like
The
this
dog says it's not cancer, so it
dog,
can't be cancer.
exactly. I'm like, everyone's face was white as a sheet, but like the dog hasn't been sniffing my boob, so I'm fine. I'm like, okay, cool. Um, and I think it was like 3 days later, I got the phone call and my doctor was away. So I had this doctor I didn't know giving me this diagnosis over the phone. And I was just like freaking out. But yeah, I remember the phone call and they were just like, unfortunately, it is cancer. It's invasive ductal carcinoma. And we're waiting on a report on the, hormonal reactivity of the cells. So we don't know anything about. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? Like, because to me at this point, it was just absolute gibberish. I had what like
Mhm.
breast cancer is supposed to not be a big deal, right? I
Yeah.
thought like they talk about it, it happens,
Yeah. It's like 1 in 7 women. And you're like,
right?
okay, 1 in 7,
Like,
that'll be fine. Cut it
right,
out,
exactly. It's like
whatever.
1 in 7. It's probably, I talked to my therapist at the time, who was an older woman who had her own run-in with breast cancer, and she didn't even need surgery. She just had targeted radiation and she was fine. And she's like, it's a good cancer to get. And I'm like,
No cancer.
completely. No, first of all, no cancer is a good cancer to get. Okay. And people need to stop saying that to people. I
Yep.
mean, I know someone, my therapist actually, who is a thyroid cancer survivor, who everyone says is like, oh, that's the best one to get. She had stage 4 thyroid cancer by the time they found it. And she had to undergo like full body radiation. She had to like eat
Whoa.
radiation. I don't even know the details, but it was bad.
Yeah.
Whatever. No such thing as good cancer. So, okay. So I'm like waiting on the hormonal reports. I go do a consult within the hospital system that my GP was in, but then I talked to my GP who's on a leave, and she's like, listen, we live in New York City. Like, yeah, my hospital's good, but just like go to Memorial Sloan Kettering. Like, you live in New York City, just
Right.
go to there. And I was
Go
like,
to the
okay.
expert. Yep.
So then I go and get a second opinion there. And so it just felt like everything's moving super, super fast at that point. And it's Christmas time. Like I got my
Hmm.
diagnosis on like December 23rd,
Oh
something
no.
like that, or 21st. Yeah, it was December 21st. And it's like my son's first Christmas, and I'm thinking it's the only one I'm gonna have with him. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, but this isn't a big deal. And I don't know what to think, and I don't know
It's
what's going on.
everything all at once. Yep.
Yeah, so that is how I was diagnosed, and it was completely bananas. So
Wow. And that is
yeah,
a quick turnaround.
it was a super
So,
quick turnaround because I'm crazy and I call places and bother them until they help me. And also, good thing that I did, because if I had followed that PA's advice about waiting for a mammogram, my staging might have been totally different, because first of all, triple negative moves so fast. And second of all, when I got imaging done at the very beginning of January, it was only like 1.2 centimeters on imaging. And then by the time, or in the middle of December when I got imaging done.
mhm.
And then by the time I was operated on January 26th, my tumor was 3.2 centimeters. So it had
Oh
like
wow.
more
Tripled
than
in size.
doubled.
Yeah,
Yeah, it had
almost.
like almost tripled in size within a month. So if I had waited another month just to start that process, like I can't even imagine what my like prognosis or outcome would have been.
Oh my God. There's a hospital here in Chicago that I know is a 6 month wait between I feel a lump and you need a mammogram.
That's crazy to me.
Insane.
It's insane. And it's like all these other things that happen wind up, I'm sure, impacting people's outcomes. I mean, even the American Cancer
Absolutely.
Society came out and started discouraging young women from doing self-exams.
Yes.
If I hadn't felt my own lump and taken it seriously, I'd be dead right now.
Hmm.
Like who thinks, oh, I'm 33, this lump in my breast like is cancer? No.
Hmm. Especially when you're just finishing breastfeeding. I mean, you could have easily just said, this is a clogged duct. It's fine. I'll come back to it. And
Mm-hmm.
then left it,
Mm-hmm.
especially during the pandemic. So I'm glad that you had that voice in your head and those spidey senses were tingling. And it's like, no, Franny, you need to go get this checked. You need to go to the doctor, bother them, bug them until they let you in.
Yeah, I mean, for once my anxiety worked out. So I guess like even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So I'm
Exactly.
glad I'm glad it served a purpose.
And then how was your experience navigating the healthcare system? I mean, I'm sure outside of COVID it would have been different, but especially during COVID, how was that experience for you?
Oh my God, it was terrible. I mean, it wasn't. I'm very privileged in that because I'm a public school teacher here in New York City, I have really good insurance. I have like a dedicated line to call at Memorial Sloan Kettering to get like a navigator to help me. Like all of these benefits through my union, which is fantastic. But COVID wound up like making a lot of my decisions for me. I would have gone with my original hospital system because they could start me faster. If it weren't for the fact that their chemo wards are all like communal, like everybody's there. But I was like, okay, I
Mm,
better go with the hospital with the private chemo rooms because of COVID.
hmm
I also picked my hospital because the other hospital treats everyone, and I was afraid of losing resources if we had another surge, which we did while I was going through treatment. Um, and I didn't want resources to be like shifted away from me because I was, not critical or something like that. And I wanted to go to a place that just treated cancer because COVID was everywhere. But it was also like just absolutely terrifying. I think I didn't see my oncologist's face in person. Like I saw it on telehealth once in a blue, but I didn't see it in person without a mask on until like last year, I think.
Oh, wow.
Because the hospital had such a strict masking policy because there
hmm
are chemo patients everywhere with
Right.
no immune system, right? Um, and such a strange depersonalizing, but like vital. I am not an anti-masker person, like so vital, but also just so weird to not see these people who are like saving your life, pumping you through with
hmm
poison, like cutting into your flesh. Like you don't get to see them
Right.
face to
It's different
face.
without the mask versus with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of the impacts for me in terms of navigating the healthcare system, it wasn't so bad with navigating the healthcare system. It was just like so much more stress because of the pressure on the healthcare system. And
Mhm.
there were some unique sort of factors going on. It was like, while I was in chemo, um, I had to call, everybody has to call if they have a fever over 100.3 or whatever. But with me, it was like, and because of COVID, it's like I immediately got put into like a room by itself. And, I had a chest x-ray every single time I had a fever, which was after at least 3 of my 8, chemo treatments. And so there was just a lot of extra precautions taken. We had no one around us because they weren't isolating. And it was really hard because a lot of people had been sort of isolating for like a good year. And we had just started to get our first vaccines when I got diagnosed. Like I managed to get my first vaccine the like right before my surgery, and I managed to get my second vaccine like a week before I started chemo. And so all of our friends and family are sort of like out in the world again because now they're vaccinated. They feel better about it. Like they know at least their chances of death are lower.
Mhm.
But it also means like I'm on chemo. Like they
Yeah.
can't come around. We have a 1-year-old baby. My husband was like working from home, watching our son, taking care of me. And I had one friend who agreed to um, isolate and mask around other people uh, whenever she was indoors to help me out so that, we knew that she had a lower chance of getting sick.
Well, I'm glad your friend was able to be there for you, take those precautions, and be able to be a support system for you, despite
Yeah, that
everybody
was
else
huge.
not, being able
Yeah,
to do that.
it was hard. And it's like, I understand why other people couldn't. My dad lives 2 hours away by himself. I understand that he needed to see people for his
Yeah.
own well-being. My mother-in-law and father-in-law had to work in person often and just like couldn't deal with it anymore. It was a lot. Everybody was really, really struggling. And so I understand, but it was just so isolating and so sad to go
Yeah.
through that. And then I also wasn't even allowed for the first half of my chemo treatments to have someone with me at chemo.
Mm.
It wasn't until halfway through chemo that I could start bringing someone with me if they masked and stuff like that.
Yeah. Were you able to bring your husband or did you bring your friend or who was your support system when they were finally allowed to come in?
So my husband absolutely could not come in. He suffers really bad PTSD from his own cancer experience. And so he always joked like, "Oh, I'm going to be your chemo Sherpa. I'm going to get you through this experience." But it was sort of like as if your Sherpa brought you to base camp and then like pieced whenever it was time for you to go up the mountain. And I don't blame him. And he knows that this is kind of how I feel, but he just couldn't do it. He would have a complete
Right.
meltdown. So when I finally could bring friends, I had a couple different friends come with me. One of my friends was getting married that June, and he wasn't having a bachelor party, so he laughed and said like, well, at least someone took me to the titty center before I got married or whatever, like. And then my dad came to my final one, which was really nice, and like I think important for him to sort of see that I had gotten through the whole thing. And you know I think he felt better knowing it was over. So
Good, good. And I know you said before you've had a complete response to
I
treatment, right? No
we think
residual.
so.
I know,
We
knock
think
on
so.
wood.
Knock on wood. So one of the things that happened in my switch to hospitals, switch between hospital systems, is my biopsy. Um, they rebiopsied my cells when it went to Sloan Kettering, and it turns out they got some regular breast tissue in with the tumor tissue in my biopsy, which they didn't realize till later because it looked like I was hormone receptor positive for my breast cancer. It looked like it wasn't triple negative. And that's why I had surgery before I went through chemo. And so what wound up happening is once they took out the tumor, they biopsied that and realized, oh no, this is like a truly triple negative breast cancer. So of course it was like immediately off to chemo, but I didn't get that thing that most triple negative survivors get, which is the knowledge of whether you had a complete response to chemo or not, because when you do chemo before surgery, you get to like watch that tumor shrink. You get to see if there's anything left at the time of surgery. And I didn't have that information. So I scoured the internet
Mhm.
and tried to ignore like unfounded, non-peer reviewed like stories about turkey tail mushrooms. And
Yep.
instead I focused on like peer reviewed studies. And there was a study done in China of women who had received chemotherapy after surgery for triple negative breast cancer. And they had put them on a year of Xeloda, which is like a chemo drug that a lot of people who don't have a complete response to treatment take for like a year after they finish their uh, chemo and radiation, after their surgery and radiation after chemo. And it increased the disease-free survival rate by like 15% in these women who didn't have information about whether or not they were disease-free at the time of surgery. So I talked to my oncologist about it, and he took a look at it and first of all asked me when I had gotten my degree in oncology, but like not
Right,
in a mean way, just in a like, what is wrong with you? I was like, I just read a lot.
right.
I don't know.
Yep.
And then he took it to the board, like for their,
Their tumor
not the
board
board, but like
review.
yeah, the
Yeah.
tumor board review, and brought up my case because it was unusual for someone with triple negative to have had surgery before chemo. And I had been advocating for myself. I was like, I want to take Xeloda for a year afterwards. And it's not the way they usually give it to women who don't have a complete response, because usually that's like 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or something like that. And this
Mhm.
was just twice a day, every single day for a year. Um, and they agreed. They let me do it. So my treatment went on for what feels like forever.
Okay,
But
Dr.
I'll take,
Franny, here we go.
yeah, but I will take,
Advocating for yourself. Very nice.
I will take an extra 15% survivability chance
Absolutely.
if I can. So
Absolutely. And then
yeah.
how were uh, I know that you said you have wonderful insurance through your union, but the financial concerns of cancer, I know breast cancer is one of the most expensive to go through.
Yeah.
How was that whole situation for you and your family?
So I wouldn't say lucky because of the circumstances, but because it's presumed that my cancer was caused by the World Trade Center disaster, I actually get everything associated with my cancer covered 100%. So it acts as a secondary insurance and covers everything my insurance doesn't cover. And I also got a financial like compensation for that. That being said, I want to talk for a minute about like the financial hits you take that don't even have anything to do with the medical system, because first of all, like, we are 100% in America where people just become bankrupted by the
Absolutely.
medical system all the
Which is
time, and I don't want
absurd.
to minimize
Yeah.
that. It is absurd. I see what people who don't have good health insurance go through. It is criminal, quite
Hmm.
frankly. um and I am lucky enough to not have had to engage with that. But living in New York City, going through something like this, like, just just the cost of parking at the cancer center alone
Hmm.
was, with the discount for patients, $34 every time I
Oof.
went there, like $15 in tolls, like, you know, you're exhausted, so you're just ordering takeout and whatever else the entire time
Hmm.
that you're there. You know, you are buying comfort items, you need all new clothes, all new bras, because nothing feels good, and you've put on weight from the steroids, and all of your clothes have stopped fitting, and you know, you have need new socks because now all of a sudden you have neuropathy in your feet, and it's just crazy. I was spending tons of money on like the CeraVe lotion with the like uric acid or something like that,
Hmm.
and it just for the year that I was on the Zolota, because it destroys your hands and feet so much, and it's just like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars worth of just ancillary things, like
Yeah.
much less. And I think I calculated my hospital bills once, and everything that had been covered through my health insurance and through the World Trade Center health program, and I'm pretty sure I'm like over $130,000 worth of medical bills for cancer treatment at this point, at least, between surgeries and everything else. I mean, like, between the surgeries I've had to deal with after effects of
Hmm.
cancer, like, because it's not over when it's over, but
No,
the
never is.
medications are incredibly expensive. Then you need over counter medications to help you deal with the side effects of the medications that are prescribed to you. It is enormous what you
Hmm.
take on financially when something like this happens.
Yeah.
And also, then you will get a case of the fuckets and you buy too much stuff on Amazon,
Yeah.
because that's just how it goes, you know.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
where else are you going to derive joy in these moments, you know?
No, you
So
have to do the random spending online because you're like, no,
yeah.
that water bottle, absolutely, I want that. It's like, oh, okay, this will help me. Heated blanket,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything convenient,
Hmm.
new comfy recliner,
Oh.
adjustable bed, you know, just I was just living it. I was like, you know what, I might be dead. Went out and bought a new
Hmm.
car. Like, what was I think I shouldn't have done that. What was I thinking? But I had
Did
a
you at least
serious
get the
case of the
heated
fuckets.
seats?
Oh yeah, no, that I
Oh,
walked in and they were
perfect.
like, which range of model do you want? And I was like, the same way I walked in a while ago to the phone store, and I was like, I want the one that easy pours the champagne on and it doesn't break, like it needs to be
Yeah.
waterproof. I
Yep.
walked in for the phone thing and I was like, I want the one that makes me wonder if I peed myself, because my butt is really warm in the middle of winter. And they were like, okay.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, it's bananas, and I don't know what I would do if I didn't have amazing health insurance. And I don't think whether you live or die should be based on how much money you have. So I find that really, really problematic.
Yeah. And, not to mention the fact that you lived in New York, right next to MSK, and were able to go see treatment there. I mean, imagine if you were in middle of nowhere, Idaho, like
Yeah.
Montana, what would you do?
I don't know. I
It's
mean, I go
insane.
online and I see these women who, like, you know, rent apartments near MD Anderson and all these things. And I don't
Hmm.
blame them. You know, I don't know
Hmm.
what I would have done if I hadn't had access to really good care, because it's like when you're faced with a diagnosis like this and you are holding your 11-month-old son and you're like, oh fuck, like I might not see you graduate kindergarten.
Hmm.
You'll just do whatever you have to do,
Yeah.
you know.
Deal
And
with
I
the
am
consequences
so,
later.
exactly, and I'm just like so privileged to not have had to make those like tough trade-off decisions.
Good. Good. That is lucky, but also very lucky that your response to treatment went through. You had a support system, even though, your husband wouldn't come into, which is totally valid, totally valid.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
that has been rough for him the whole
mhm.
time.
I'm sure
Even
he's
now,
had feelings about that afterwards.
yeah, he, I think, is finally starting to heal from the whole ordeal,
Hmm.
you know. And I don't know if that's something you want to talk about at all, but I'm happy to
I
chat about
mean,
that. I
whatever
mean, I
you
see
think.
these I see these statistics of, you know, 50% of women who get diagnosed with cancer wind up getting divorced like within
Hmm.
the next 5 years, and it is so upsetting for me. But meanwhile, I have like what I consider an absolute top tier partner in this world. Like he is a wonderful human. He is a feminist. Like we share the load. He is always working on improving himself. He's like I lucked out. But dealing with all of this, he was so re-traumatized by it. And I think he was so unused to having to do a lot of the mental load and the emotional load that he just checked out. Like he went through the motions, he took care of me, he took care of our son, he went to work, but he was not okay. And it came to like a breaking point, um, you know, this year where it was just like he needed some changes needed to be made. And like he totally sees it now, but he just as a defense mechanism, I think, just like checked out completely and just went on autopilot. And like it's so hard when something that you are going through and something that is like trying to kill you winds up hurting the people that you love also. And then there's this tension between what you need and want from them and what they're able to do for you. So I do feel really lucky that our marriage survived it, but not unscathed. And like there's just a lot of healing that has to be done once you're done healing physically. And it's just such a bummer in every way. Cancer impacts literally every aspect of your life, and it's hard to understate how much until you've been through it.
And you guys are working through that now.
Oh yeah, we love each other. We're dedicated to each other. It's going to be our 10th wedding anniversary in a
Oh,
couple of weeks.
congratulations.
Thank you. And we've been together for 17 years now. So we've been together since I was 20.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so we've been through it. Like we've seen a
mm-hmm.
lot.
Mm-hmm. I just
But
celebrated my 10-year anniversary with my now
congratulations.
fiance. So
Oh,
yeah, high
congratulations.
school sweethearts, you grow up with
Oh,
somebody, you go through
yeah.
life with them
Yeah,
and all the ups and downs that life has.
absolutely. And I mean, I don't know if you found this, but you're different people now than you were 10 years ago.
Yes, yes.
And it's
And
like
it
a
is,
decision
mhm.
to stay together, right?
Yeah. And to love the person that they are now and to appreciate them and be with them because life changes you. And I
Yeah.
have, every absolute, uh, all the respect for people who can be together for, since they were young to wherever they are currently, because you're
Yeah.
not your teenage self. There's no way.
No, and I also think that a lot of times relationships fail because you're determined to be your teenage self,
Mhm.
and that doesn't
Or
leave room.
someone, exactly, or someone is determined to keep you where you were as your teenage self and
Right.
can't recognize the fact that, no, we've both grown and changed,
Hmm.
recognize where we are now, which, yeah, couples therapy, open, honest communications, like all of those expectations have to be laid out.
Yeah, we started couples therapy for the first time this summer, and I'm like, why have we not been doing this
Mhm.
for so many more years than this? It's been fantastic. And I think also just the fact that we're both willing to do that speaks to why we're going to be okay, even if it's shitty sometimes. Because like we're both willing to own our stuff and we're both willing to work on it, even if it's not like fun to get there.
Yeah. But
So
I mean, they say love is work.
yeah,
And I mean, it
it
is.
is.
It is. It's a choice to stay with somebody and to build something with them and to grow what you guys have.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you guys are still together. I know that those statistics are very, very grim,
I know.
which
I
I
know.
could
It's
not
bad.
imagine going through cancer treatment and a divorce at the same time.
Oh my gosh. And it seems like everybody does, I met
Hmm.
multiple, and I'm not even exaggerating, multiple women that I was talking to while I was like in a waiting room or whatever at the hospital who were going through breakups or divorces, or I overheard them talking to their friends in the waiting room. And I was just like, okay, I guess in the scheme of things, I would rather have a husband who can't come into the chemo suite with
Right,
me, but is
right.
going to be like around. Um, yeah, really bad, really, really
Hmm.
bad. And it's how we, not to go on a feminist
Okay.
rant, but it is how we socialize men. Like we don't teach them how to be caretakers. We don't teach them how to just like soldier on the way that women kind of have
Always
to
have been.
always.
Yeah.
Right. And when, the shit hits the fan and your wife is in bed for 2 weeks because she's having like crazy bone pain from cancer treatment and like literally can't get up, you've got to do everything for the kid and you've got to
Mhm.
go to work and you've got
Yeah.
to, bring your wife some soup. And
Yeah.
what
And do
else
the
can you do?
household chores and take care of the kid and take care of yourself and your wife at the
Mhm.
same time.
Yeah,
It's a lot.
it
The
is a lot. And I do give
caretaker
him a
load that,
ton of credit. Yeah.
yeah. Any advice for caregivers out there or for women of the caregivers?
I mean, for caregivers and also for friends and whatever, like I think just meeting your cancer patient where they're at, I think is the best advice I have. And, just try to match their energy. Like the worst times were when I felt like he was being toxically positive because he was like, it felt dismissive.
Hmm.
Um, and, and the times that he was able to actually like access his own experiences and relate to me and understand what I was going through were the times that it was best. And I think convenience is key. Just like, don't make your cancer patient think about anything they don't have to think about.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
if you don't know what to get your cancer patient, the answer is like a Grubhub gift card.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, just, you know, take as much off their plate as you can. Because I definitely still tried to do way too much while I was in treatment. And now I look back and I'm just like, what was I doing? I had just come off maternity leave, so I didn't have any more time off. And
Were you
so,
still teaching while going
well, we
through
were all on
treatment?
Zoom.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
We were on Zoom and I was still teaching. There were days that I told my co-teachers, like, yo, I'm just not going to turn my camera on today or say words, and I will probably be asleep during class. They were like, it's okay, we got you. And I was so lucky that my school set it up so I always had co-teachers in every class that I had to teach online. But yeah, I was working that entire time. I don't know why. I mean, I had to make money, right? I do know why.
Exactly. Right. You
Um,
got to pay off that mortgage that you just got.
yeah, and it's like, and then I see these like stories that are supposed to be heartwarming where it's like teacher grading homework in cancer center. And first of all, no, like don't do that. And second of all, and then they'll be like, staff donate sick days to teacher at cancer center. And it's just like, how about you just acknowledge that when people are sick, they're sick? Like, why are there all of
Right.
these arbitrary limits? I don't think humans are fundamentally bad or fundamentally trying to like get over on anything. Like, I think for the most part, with a very few exceptions, if you just let people be sick when they're sick, I doubt people will take advantage of that as much as folks are afraid. And it's just heartbreaking to me when I like see those things and think about all the choices and like the humiliation of it all and having to like ask for extra consideration and help. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. The worst one that I see is like students raise money for their teacher going through treatment. And I'm like, that is
pay your teacher
not
a
the
living
job.
wage,
Right, exactly.
give
That
them
is
health
not the job of
insurance.
the student to raise money for their teacher at all.
Yeah,
We can't be
it makes me
doing
so
this.
mad. It makes me so mad. And it's just, yeah, it's just really, really upsetting.
Yeah.
Because we have the technology. You know what I
And
mean?
we
Like,
have the money.
yeah, we do have the money. It's
Hmm.
being hoarded, but we have it. And
It's being
it's
put
on
towards the
air
wrong things.
it's
Yeah.
it's on aircraft carriers and it's on
Hmm.
missiles and it's not
Hmm.
in the cancer centers, and it's
Hmm.
just really, really upsetting.
Hmm.
I don't, want to turn anyone off by getting too political, but it's just it enrages me. It
I mean, I think
enrages.
it's the entire US healthcare system. It just needs to be burnt down and then rebuilt
Yeah.
in a way that
Mhm.
makes sense. None of these
Yeah.
convoluted, oh, go to and hospitals have charity care that they're supposed to be giving out. They have
Yeah.
a fund. These are supposed to be nonprofits. And then you see
Right.
their balance sheets at the end of the year, and you see the bonuses that the C-suite is getting, and you're like,
Yeah, you see the bonuses the C-suite is
oh,
getting, and you also see how much they're investing and whatever else. And it's like, why are
mm-hmm,
hospitals investing? And
mm-hmm,
I understand economics. Like I understand that in a capitalist system, like they supposedly need to do that in order to make more money on their money to do things. But all I know is that people are being charged $500 for a Tylenol in the emergency department,
oh yeah.
and I know that's an
And it
exaggeration, but
cost me $36 to park my car in your parking garage.
right. Right,
Like
exactly.
that is a smidge of a percentage of what you are gaining in interest or in returns from your stock investments. Why,
Exactly.
why, why?
Right. And why are the people down at, Coney Island Hospital dealing with, cockroaches coming out of the walls, but like I get to go to Memorial Sloan Kettering because, I'm privileged and I have good health insurance. It's
Mhm.
really tragic. And it's why we see such disparate outcomes, like for, people of color, for low income people. Like it's not okay. And it should be embarrassing, honestly. Like,
It's
how
terrible.
do
Have you
we
seen the graph of like US healthcare spending and our outcomes compared to the rest of the
Mhm.
world?
Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
Absurd. Absolutely absurd.
It's absurd. And I don't know, it needs to be burnt to the ground. Like, I just don't
Mhm.
understand why healthcare isn't a human right and why some people are allowed to get good care and some people just can't. And like, we perpetuate this myth that it's because like they didn't do the right thing to have enough money. It's like, who cares?
Mhm.
Who cares what they did or didn't do or what their circumstances were? Like, this is
Right.
someone's mom
Yep. No one should be dying
in
of
treatment.
complications from type 2 diabetes. Like,
It's
there's
ridiculous.
no way. There's no way.
No, no. And people are like rationing their insulin. Like, people,
Mhm.
and I know insulin, oh, only $35 a month now. Like, that patent was given away for free so that
Yep.
everyone could have insulin. And the drug companies have still somehow made it like a way to make profit.
And they say, oh, it's on the development of the pumps and it's on. Okay. There's no way. Come on.
No.
I know how much money you guys make. I see your stock prices
Mhm.
go sky high. It's like, come on, we
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah. It's just this like widespread, incredibly popular false consciousness about healthcare and this myth that the entire system will collapse if we start like treating people like human beings. And I
Mhm.
refuse to buy it.
It's healthcare as a business,
Hmm.
and it shouldn't be a business. This is
No.
about the patients that you see, the people that you treat.
Yep.
It's I don't have any answers besides burn it to the
No, but it's
ground,
nice to talk
start
to
from
someone who
new.
has
Because
worked in it. Yeah, I mean, well, I feel
I
that way about a lot
see
of
it.
things.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah. And it's crazy because my background is in the operating room, the
Mhm.
literal profit center of the hospital. Your elective knee surgeries, your joint replacements, everything, nose
Mhm.
jobs, boob jobs, you name
Yeah,
it. It's like I
yeah.
see how much money you guys make because I see the back end of when I go in and scan in those implants for those
Hmm.
knee replacements. And I'm like, oh, times 3,000%. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah.
You just get to jack up the price and insurance is going to pay for it. And the irony of this is if you go in there and say, oh, I'm going to be cash pay, I'm a self-pay patient. Suddenly everything is so much cheaper and, everybody
Weird.
is encouraged. Right. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. If I pay with
Hmm.
cash, cash is king, hasn't changed,
It's
probably will
still
never change.
ridiculously expensive,
Absolutely,
but
absolutely. But if we can knock 20% of that cost off by just paying
yeah,
in cash, it's like, wait a
yeah,
second. Why are we paying these middlemen?
because I have a lot of feelings about because why, and a
Hmm.
lot of them have to do with economic theory that I'm
Oh,
not going
yeah.
to get too far into it right now. But because of the machine,
Healthcare is a
right?
business and the
Right.
economy needs to
It's the
grow and
healthcare industrial
GDP and
complex, the same way that we have a
absolutely.
military industrial complex, the same way we even have a
Hmm.
wedding industrial complex these
Oh
days.
man.
Yeah,
I'm planning that right now.
as you
Yes,
know,
yes.
yeah,
I'm
that's what
like
made me think
looking
of it.
at, oh man, I'm like trying to rent out a venue and I'm like, excuse me, what? I'm like, okay, so I can just go to a park for free. Screw this. Elope,
Hmm.
entirely elope. And I'm like, okay, I'll just throw a party with my closest,
Hmm.
50, 100 friends, tell them it's not a wedding,
Yep.
make it
And
work.
all the caterers, all your vendors, just tell them that it's a party, because the second you say the word wedding, it goes up 40%.
The wedding tax, the pink
Hmm.
tax, everything.
Oh, I was telling my students about this
Ugh.
the other day, and I was like, "Hey guys, do you think you need a different razor to shave your beard than you do your legs?" And they were like, "No." And I was like, "Then why are women's razors twice as expensive?" And they were like,
I have gotten to the point now, I just share a razor, change the
"Yeah,
head with my
hmm,
fiance. I'm like, men's razors work better anyway.
yep,
There's
yep."
absolutely no reason why I am
Hmm.
spending, $15 on some fancy Gillette razor. There's no way.
And it's like socks. Why are
Hmm.
socks more expensive for us?
Oh my God, I haven't noticed that
They're
one.
smaller.
They should be cheaper.
Right. No, it's absurd. It's absurd. And I actually recently like finally left social media, which I know is like a funny thing to say now that I'm like doing a podcast, but because just because of these things, like I was getting marketed to so much and I was falling for it so much and I was just like I can't. I'm just so sick of the way things work here and like the fact that everyone's so attached to the way things are because they're afraid of the way that things could be. And I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, like I read some article about how a woman who like was in Iceland needed a mammogram and a biopsy and she was able to get it done on the same day and get her results on the same day, all in the same clinic in the same place. And she was like walking around asking like, where do I pay for this? Or like, how do I schedule the next thing? And they were like, no, just walk across the hall and we're going to go do that thing. And I was just like, and I know Iceland has like 10 people in it. I get it. But there there has to be a middle ground between what's
Right.
going on there and what's happening here.
Yeah.
6 months to get a lump checked?
6 month delay.
I would
Yeah,
have been dead.
I
And I
know.
remember
The
talking to
woman
my
that I
brother.
spoke to, yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was talking to my brother and he's in the UK, and because they're trying to privatize,
Hmm.
nationalize healthcare, and because it's like this terrible crossbreed, he's like, thank God you weren't here. You would have waited forever. And I'm just like, but also at least you won't end up bankrupt over there. I don't know. I don't know what the
I
solution
know
is,
the
but
50-50 of that. Yeah, the woman that I spoke to felt a lump, no family history, nothing. Said, went to her hospital and they said, it's about 6 months before we can get you in for a mammogram. And she's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work for me. Goes, 20 minutes down the road to the other hospital. Within that 6 month wait period, she had already biopsy results, chemo, surgery done. Within that 6 months that it would have taken for them to even get her in for a mammogram.
and what would her outcome have been?
It
You know?
insane. Who knows? Luckily, who knows? But yeah.
And I'm sure, I bet you that that hospital's metrics like bases
Oh,
it on
beautiful.
diagnosis date, so they don't care because
Mm-hmm.
it's not like their fault that she had to wait
Mm-mm.
that long because she wasn't
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed yet. So
So it doesn't count. Yep. Oh, I know. And you see their billboards downtown and you see all their awards and you're like, ooh, I know that dirty little secret of yours. And it's like,
yeah,
okay,
that's
nice to know
awful.
how this works.
Yeah.
Hmm. Any tips, tricks that only a cancer survivor would know that people going through it for the first time need to hear because it was truly life-changing for you?
Um, don't be afraid to speak up when there's something wrong. And I don't just mean when you're getting diagnosed. I mean during treatment, I had like an anaphylactic reaction to my chemo drug and they responded that much faster because I was like, I feel weird. It's like, of course I feel weird. I'm on chemo, but like speaking up, you know, um, really helped. I think advocating for yourself. I mean, this is not anything life changing or brand new. I think if I could go back and give myself any advice, it's just to really go easy on myself and not try to pretend that things are normal. Like it's okay for things to not be normal at this time in your life. And hopefully, like knock on wood, it will be temporary, even if it's terrible. And the only way out is through. So, like, whatever you can do to make your own life easier, you absolutely should go for it and do it. Um, and not feel guilty about it at all, which I think, especially as women, is really, really hard. But I know it's hard for men too, because there's a point of pride there. So
Yeah. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
no.
Don't be afraid to tell people where you're at and how they can best help you. And sometimes it's, I need you to sit in the suck with me. Like, I need you to
Yeah.
sit on the couch and just be here as I cry
Yeah, and I
because
think
there's
telling people
nothing
that is
else.
important because they want to do whatever's good for you, but they're afraid they're going to like make you sad or make you upset if you acknowledge how really bad the situation is. But the best times ever have been when I've been willing to acknowledge how bad the situation is and like I felt seen and I felt heard. I also think like don't be afraid to laugh while this is happening. I was like teasing a friend of mine the other day because she is very not affectionate outwardly at all ever, and but when she found out that I was sick, she showed up to my house with like a bag of goodies and a card, and she just like, rang and ran, and I opened them up, and there was a card inside that said, if I were a cat, I'd spend all 9 of my lives with you. And I brought
Oh.
this up again the other day when she was teasing me about something irrelevant, and she
Mhm.
she said, without even thinking, she said, well, at that point I didn't think this life was going to be that long. And I died. It was she was horrified at herself. She felt terrible, and I thought it was the best thing anyone had ever said to me, because it's just like, people need to acknowledge, like, this is really bad, you know what I mean? Like, and
Yeah.
it's funny too. It has to be funny, otherwise what's the point? Um, there are so many indignities that you're going to face that if you can make any jokes of them at all, it's totally worth it.
Mhm.
So
There was and I know it's behind a paywall, but Hank Green did a wonderful like stand-up comedy set about his life during cancer. And at one point, the funniest part was he had just gotten his diagnosis and he saw a like a styrofoam cup in the parking lot, and he goes, "That cup doesn't have cancer. Why can't I just be a styrofoam cup and life would be so much easier?" And I'm like, yeah,
I
you
get
know
that.
what? Does that hit home?
Yeah, you can totally, I think, I don't know, it's really weird being in my 30s and like looking around and seeing all these people with these bodies that are still super healthy and haven't been like pumped through full of poison and haven't had not genes, sorry, cells mutate and like try to murder them. And I'm just like, what's it like to have a body that hasn't tried to murder you? Because mine has, like repeatedly. So it's just, yeah, I totally identify with that, and it's okay to feel that way. Like, you're allowed to feel bad for yourself sometimes. Like, most people don't have to deal with this. It's not fair. You don't have to pretend that it is, or that it happened for a reason or something like that. Like, sometimes things just suck.
Um, I know this is heavy, but anything that helped you cope through it? Any words of wisdom, any shows that you binge watched consistently during it, or, what helped the most?
I have to be honest, like, my memory in terms of like passing the time at that point is really fuzzy, especially because for the second half of chemo, I was on pretty heavy duty painkillers because of a side effect I was having from one of my chemo drugs. Um, but I did just binge watch whatever I wanted to. And in terms of things that helped me get through it, like, I just kept like repeating to myself, like, the only way out of this is through. And sometimes I had to take it minute by minute. And I know it sounds like very AA, and some people hate that stuff, and I'm not like in AA or anything, but like, just thinking about it, like, okay, like, I can do this for the next minute, like, I can do this for
Mhm.
the next hour, I can do this for the next day. And it really came down to that sometimes. And I have to say, like, there were times that were really, really low, and I couldn't imagine a life beyond it. And I mean, I think that's actually how you found me, because I put this post on
Yeah.
Reddit because I had left the breast cancer groups when I was done with treatment, because I didn't need to be there anymore, and it was more of a trigger than anything. But then I was thinking the other day, because it was my son's first day of pre-K, um, about how I was really afraid I was never going to like be around long enough for him to talk to me, be around long enough to see him like go to daycare, even because we were still in the pandemic and he was at home with us. Like, I didn't think I was going to be around at all to see him grow up. And like, I wish I had had someone that had been through it like me to talk to. And that's why I'm doing this, to know like there is life on the other side, and like your life is forever and irrevocably changed, but it can still be really, really beautiful. And you will someday actually go full days without thinking about cancer anymore. And I never thought that that would be possible. Even a year ago, I was thinking about cancer every single day. And now there are entire days when I will forget that that happened to me. And it is beautiful.
Mhm.
So I think just remembering that this is an episode in
Mhm.
your season of life, and it completely sucks, but if you get through it, you will have a life again, and it will not always revolve around this diagnosis that you're dealing with.
That's beautiful, and I love that. I know that, cold outreach on Reddit isn't always the best way to go. And I'm glad that it
Well,
resonated with you.
thanks. Yeah. I mean, I think I especially remember um this is also something I want people who are newly diagnosed to know. The people who are online often are often the people who are really sick or are dealing with a new diagnosis or a recurrence and they need that community. And the people who are out living their life are not hanging out on the internet all day. And some of them remember and come back and act as supports, but that's not most people. And so you definitely get a skewed sample when you're looking at the women in these breast cancer groups, and they're all wonderful and they all deserve to be heard and they deserve a place, but it's really easy to start thinking like, oh god, like I'm definitely going to have a recurrence, or it's definitely going to turn stage 4, or it's definitely, and there's no definitely it absolutely could, but it probably won't. Like, and that's also one thing I've had to remind myself is like, yeah, my numbers as a triple negative breast cancer survivor are not as good as the hormone positive receptor cancers in terms of recurrence rate and stuff like that. And yes, there are fewer treatments for me because it doesn't respond to hormone therapy. Um, but the numbers are still on my side, even if they're scary.
Mhm.
And I know that that's not true for folks who are like stage 4 de novo. I know that this does not apply to everyone, but if you are like me and you have an early-ish stage cancer, you know, the numbers are on your side. Like, you still are more likely to be okay than you are to not. And I think that that's a really important thing to hold on to when you start getting really, really scared, because there are a lot of scary things on the internet. And
Mhm.
I wish we would have more positive things there too.
Did you like looking at those reoccurrence calculators? What are your thoughts on those? Is
Oh
it,
God.
yeah, I know that that one's a hot topic.
Yeah, I mean, I like data. I know, weirdly, for an English teacher, I also have a really strong science education. So like I do know how to parse data. I do know how to understand statistics and things like that. Um, I was mostly frustrated because of my unique situation that like I didn't know if I'd
Mhm.
had a complete response to chemo or not. Um, but I do wish that I didn't have to do so much of the work on the data myself and so much of the guessing around it, because there are things I don't know. Like, I'm not an oncologist. Um, and so I tortured myself with those things a lot. It was really hard.
In
Yeah.
hindsight, worth it or not worth it for you?
Um, it gave me an illusion of control. So maybe at the moment it was worth it, but I actually wish that they just like didn't exist. I wish I had less information.
Mhm.
Or that someone could just like summarize the information for me. But, you know, and I guess my oncologist was, right? But there's like this sick sort of desire for more. I don't know. That's a really great question. I keep contradicting myself.
That's okay.
If I had to go back, I probably would have done it the same way. I probably would have looked
Mhm.
at those calculators. I just feel like there is comfort in having as much information as possible, even if that is like to be able to prepare myself for whatever outcome it might be if it's negative.
Yeah. Oh, this was heavy. I know that we already kind of did parting words. Any final thoughts? Any things that helped you through it that you want to plug, that you want to tell people about? Anything? This
um,
is your time.
There are a couple of really fun Instagram accounts I really like that I want to recommend. If you don't follow the cancer patient, you should, if you find dark humor helpful, which I do. I think following the cancer patient is great. A lot of times that's the only way my husband and I could communicate about our feelings, was like sending each other memes from the cancer patient on Instagram. And then there's also another account called No Grief Tourists Allowed. Um, which is really cool. Every Tuesday, she does like Tuesday tea in her stories, and people write in about like whatever they're going through, um, and or ask questions and like crowdsource information from sort of like the cancer fam. So I definitely recommend those two accounts. But I think that just being as kind to yourself as you can as you go through this, and just letting yourself feel whatever you feel and want whatever you want, is really, really, really important. And I hope that you can find as much peace as you go through this, um, as you can. And, I feel like we probably only got into like a fifth of all the things, like the pre, the post, the complication, and none of that matters though in the end. Like what matters in the end is like, I don't know, I'm alive, like I'm not dead, and I'm
Yeah.
really glad. And there are times now when I'll get really upset about something totally not important, and I'll just be like, well, I'm not dead, so,
Yeah.
and that's a great feeling.
And it puts things
So,
into context.
yeah, it really does. Oh, therapy, go to therapy.
I think
Don't be
that that one's
afraid.
a universal one.
Yeah, I mean, that's universal, but also don't be afraid of antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. Like, listen, if you're going through the kind of cancer where you're going to end up on chemo and whatever else, if you're going to pump your body full of poison so that you don't die, like a little Cymbalta is not going to kill you. Like, just do whatever you need to do to maintain your mental health. So I also strongly recommend that.
Okay. All right. Seek community, talk to
Yeah.
experts. Don't be ashamed. Ask questions, advocate for
Hmm.
yourself.
Yes, please advocate for yourself. I mean, so many things could have gone wrong if I hadn't done that. And, you know, I think it's really, really important not to let people dismiss you, especially in the breast cancer space, because as women, we are dismissed medically all the time. If you know something is
Hmm.
wrong, go get it checked, period.
Hmm.
And if you were downtown in the days following September 11th, please sign up with the World Trade Center health program so that you can get monitored regularly for anything that might crop up. They give you every other year chest x-rays and all kinds of other goodies to make sure that you don't get sick. So
All right. Well, Franny, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being the first guest on this
thanks for
podcast. I
having me.
love it.